that's doing it right, doing the subdivision now. But this will probably be as interesting for you as anything, because it shows where the parcels are, how much he paid for them.
Interesting.
This is that, do you remember I talked to you about, oh no, that's a different road.
Now, the not Waterford, what's the other group that had, the ones that have the land, the Waterton or
Waterhouse?
Waterhouse.
That's over here.
Yeah, what is the Waterhouse? I'm not,
Well, Waterhouse family was a logging family based out of Seaside, and they had a pretty good sized logging operation, and they hired Wells Fargo to manage some of their properties, and they had a trust, Waterhouse Trust, and they were very close to Bill Mannion. So Bill Mannion was the realtor that took over Surf Pines when Barney left, and Bill was the one that sold the Waterhouse family all the property in Surf Pines. In other words, the property in Surf Pines, which they bought a number of different parcels in Surf Pines. As the road goes, let's see. Well, Barney doesn't show the road. He shows the road straight here. The road kind of goes up this way. Waterhouse family has bought all those lots, which they weren't on the ocean front. They were right behind the ocean front. Plus,
they'd be on the east side of Ocean then.
yes, correct. And then the Waterhouse family also bought the balance of property from Ray Earl that's now, whatever, I can't remember what it's, the Easy Way Lane or something. When you come into Surf Pines, you turn into here. It's now Polo Ridge is up here.
Yeah, Polo Ridge.
That was all part of the Waterhouse Trust property, most of that.
Before I forget, I do have one question here. Okay, you're showing the tract office right here on the side of where your property is.
That's where Barney Schroeder lot. Then he moved it. Once he built his house, he moved the tract office to approximately where it is right now, that little gatehouse.
Okay,
That was the
yeah, and
sales
that
office.
was originally Bill Mannion's office, wasn't
Yes,
it?
correct, here.
Yeah, because Mike told me that. Now,
Yeah.
Don Kruger was saying that he thought that the gatehouse had been all the way on 101.
No, never.
And Mike said, no, that's not the case. So it was originally on your property
Correct.
here, then you moved it to where it's located now.
Yeah.
So it never was over on
No.
101.
No.
Okay. See, he swears that that gatehouse was on 101. And I says, no, there's no way, because it's owned by farmers. There was a farmer that owned that, farmer that owned
Yeah,
that.
this was Ray Earl, whose family was in the Johnson family, okay? Ray married into the Johnson family, and they owned all of this property. And Barney bought part of it from them, which was part of Surf Pines, and the balance the Earl family had, and they wound up selling it to the Waterhouse Trust. And
So that was all Waterhouse Trust area.
Yeah, and the Earl family also sold that 15 acres that was right in here. Or actually was right in this area.
Okay. Then the second question I have is now that they're developing that big section over here, you said you used to own, you bought the
Delray Beach Flat.
no, Billy
Billy Reed.
Billy Reed. You bought the
That's
Billy Reed
that's
farm.
way to the north. I bought the Reed Ranch in 1970 in 2001, right after 9/11 or right before 9/11, and it was 275 acres, and I bought it with two Piners partners, and we owned it for, well, we sold it in 2014, so we had it for about 13 years, and we sold a portion of it to the North Coast Land Conservancy and the military department.
Yeah, and then, so Land Conservancy has some land right in this area right here, don't they?
No, well, yes, well, not, let me show you exactly here.
I'm just trying to get it clear in my mind.
Okay. We're right here,
Right,
okay, and then here's Pinehurst.
right,
This is Craig Weston's property right here.
right.
The little road goes right in there. And then there's.
That was C's property.
Yeah, correct.
and-
See, there were two parcels. Both parcels were approximately 44 acres. And C had one parcel, and his brother had another parcel. And that's 44 acres. So those two parcels are not developed at some point. They will be. They'll be in the urban growth boundary. And that's another concern that I have for Surf Pines is that, what happens once you get a development similar to the reserve in there, and it'll happen. I mean, because they're gonna be in the urban growth boundary, and I'm not sure what the time frame is gonna be, but.
Oh, really? So all of this is in the urban
No,
growth?
but it more than likely will be, because my understanding is that the city has to have a certain amount of property in reserve or in the urban growth boundary for expansion, and they can't go to the west, that's the ocean, they can't go to the south, that's seaside, they can't go to the east, that's all developed. The only place they can go is to the north.
So they may try to annex that property
Yeah.
into Gerhardt.
Yes, I'm sure they will. And it just makes sense. We tried Pinehurst. I got a group of Pinehurst people together, and we made a really good offer on the Adams property. Adams is John Adams, his family or trust is the brother of Paul C. And we made a really good offer to the Adams family about 8 or 9 years ago, and they turned us down. I mean, it was a big number, and I couldn't believe he did, that they turned us down. So I don't know what's going to happen. But the water's there, everything is in place. It makes sense.
Okay, see, I'm off a little bit. So actually, the Reed farm is actually further
Way
north.
north, way
Way
north,
north.
way north.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see. I forgot.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
because this is the
That's
Sir Pines
Serpines Road, yeah.
Okay, so how did Billy get back? Because Billy ended up moving back over there, didn't he? Or does
Well,
he
he-
just have part of the land?
No, the Reed family, they had a house that's now owned by Vince Williams' daughter, and they have a little gate around it. That was the house that Billy Reed lives in right now was his grandmother's house. And then Bob Reed and his wife built that really nice ranch house, which at the time they built it in the mid-50s was really something. It was really neat. And Bob Reed had a lot going on then. He had a mink farm, and he had a cattle ranch, and he was doing quite well. And the old house that Billy lives in was his grandmother's house. She lived there until she died. And then around the early part of 1960s, sometime in 1960s, there was an aluminum plant proposed in the Warrenton area.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, there was a
And-
big to do about
And
that.
Pacific Corp was really involved in it, and they needed land for housing for the people that were going to work there. So they bought the Reed Ranch from Bill Reed's dad, Bob Reed, and they owned it for years and years and years, and then tried to sell it. Or a guy from California tried to buy it, and he entered into a contract with him, but he didn't close on it, kind of defaulted. And they put a for sale sign up on it, and we saw the for sale sign and bought it the next day. So that's how we wound up getting it. And then in the early, it was about the same time that maybe 2002 or 3, I developed a relationship with the Oregon National Guard. They were having issues with butterfly problems, and they wanted to expand their helicopter pad, but they had butterfly issues. So we put together a mitigation proposal whereby we wound up selling the southern portion of the Reed Ranch, which was 106 acres, to North Coast Land Conservancy in conjunction with the military department.
Okay, yes. Okay, I remember that. Okay.
And that's how that happened. And we still had 175 acres that we retained. And that we were going to do a development on it sometime, but then we got caught up with the downturn in the economy in 8 and 9, and nothing was happening, and a couple of my partners wanted to sell, so we wound up selling it.
Now, was any of that the part that Henke and his group are doing now for doing that development over there by the scales?
Yeah.
That's where the
Well,
land came from for that development.
Harry was involved, but I don't think Harry was part of the original group that bought it from us, but Ryan Osborne was. Ryan Osborne put the group together, and there was a couple guys from the Bend area, and they put the deal together with us. We sold the property to them. They submitted an application to the county, got the density increased to, I think, 86 or 87 lots.
Yeah.
We were only going to put 60 lots on all the property. That was my deal's always been larger lots, not smaller lots. But anyway, they got it approved. Once they got it approved, then they put it on the market immediately, and Ryan and Harry got together, and I think they've got one other partner, I'm not sure, but Harry's taking the lead on it, and they're in the process of putting their infrastructure in right now.
Yeah, in fact,
works
I
in the
actually
water.
took a drive through it, and they've got the fire
Yeah.
hydrants in already.
Yeah, so, they'll be in the market. Maybe-
Now, how are they adapting with getting on 101? Because that's
They have a turn lane. We did most of the work on the turn lane. We spent an awful lot of money with the Oregon Department of Transportation. And we needed to finalize one thing before we actually got the permit for the turn lane. But the turn lane we were told that we had to have the turn lane approved before we could get the development approved. So we knew that we had to do that, and the cost was to put the turn lane in, it was $250,000. So we didn't finalize it. When Osborne submitted his plan to the county, they did it in 2 phases, and the county allowed them to come off Highway 101 with that existing road that they have without a turn lane if phase 1 only included, I think, 40 or 45 lots. That's how come they got away with that. But at some point, when they develop the remainder of the property or get the balance of the property approved, then they're gonna have to put a turn lane in.
Okay, so they're doing it in a split.
Correct.
That's how they got away with it. Okay,
a
see,
phased
that was the
project.
question. I couldn't figure out. I'd heard about the turn lane,
Yeah,
but I figured 87 lots or 86 lots just wasn't going to hack it for a turn lane. So they're
Well,
only doing half of them.
yeah, we were gonna have to do it for 60 lots. I mean, it's a major project. I mean, building a turn lane is expensive. And the other thing with the county wanted was, they wanted kind of a frontage road that would lead into, Reed and Hurdig and the other little project now that is a veterinarian clinic or whatever the hell it is. I don't know, but there are too many accidents on those curves. That's a bad area.
Oh, right there by
Those
the
curves-
entrance to Colby Lake.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
Correct. So those businesses would access off the turn lane that we would create and the frontage road.
Oh, but that's not how they're doing it now.
It more than likely will be when they have to build the turn lane. Because they haven't built a turn lane yet. They just have a road that comes off Highway 101.
Yeah, and
So
right
they're-
now, that's why I say, right now, it's not.
Yeah, and they're gonna
Ready for
have,
prime
at some
time.
point, if they wanna develop the rest of the lots, they're gonna have to put the turn lane in.
So they're hoping they can generate enough revenue to be able
Yeah.
to do the second one. Okay.
Yeah. Mm.
Okay, that was a question that has come up a dozen different times, and I didn't realize it was part of the Reed Ranch, but that makes a lot more sense
Yeah.
then.
And then there's another, Randy Kurz has a house that's kind of in the middle of it, and he's gonna wind up coming off that road too. Once they put the turn lane in, they'll shut down the existing road that he has.
So does Billy now own the property where he has his sheep and all that, or is he just renting that?
Billy and Madeline still own 15 to 20 acres in there.
Okay,
And their zoning will allow one house or one home for every 5 acres. So I think they have 4 lots, something like that.
now here's the $1 million question that no one has had the answer to. When I was doing the research for the reserve study, basically, and that's where I came up with the fact that we are a legal corporation. One of the things that I found is that, when Surf Pines was actually developed as a homeowners association in 1969, there was only really one ORS rule, and I think I mentioned that earlier, that basically said that you had to make 2 copies of your plat, so the surveyor had a copy, and nothing else really applied. But then in the 70s, they didn't have CCNRs, and that's when they were able to break them into, because the original CCRs were 1 acre minimums, and they had that changed, and that's how they were able to get the smaller lots, what's now high surf.
Those lots were, they were platted or not platted, I'm not sure. That happened in the latter part of the 50s or early 60s.
But it wasn't actually, the houses were all developed and built in the 70s.
No, not necessarily. They started, a guy named Mike DeMeo came from Portland or from Hillsborough, and he started building those houses on those little tiny lots.
On the Seabreeze, where Lucas used to be in Seabreeze now, that section there?
Well, just off Mannion Drive to the east of Mannion Drive, in between Mannion and the Malarkey property, those houses, I'm not sure I can't remember where the streets are, but it was Okay, here's where we are, going up in here, these little tiny lots,
Yeah, right in here. These are the lots I'm talking about, right in here.
that's probably right.
Yeah, see, this would have been Lucas, and then this was changed to Emmanuel. But this used to be called Lucas. There's Horizon, and now it's called Seabreeze. And
Yeah,
all of
that's
these
right.
lots here.
Yes, those are little tiny lots, and I kind of think that Bill Mannion did that, but I'm
Well,
not positive.
according to Mike, it actually was Barney Lucas that did it because Bill didn't want small lots. Now, this is what Mike said.
Well, it could be,
And-
but keep in mind, Barney had small lots over here.
Well, and first I've heard of that.
Yeah.
But the question I had is that they developed these into 1/3 quarter-acre lots, and I looked at the platting, and I've actually got a copy that Mike gave me. Okay, in 1982, the county changed Surf Pines and actually created a separate zone for Surf Pines.
They did, CBR
Called the
zone.
CBR zone.
I went through all those hearings, and it was.
Okay,
that
this
was
is the question I had. Okay, with the CBR, who initiated that?
Surf Pines, Coastal Beach Residential. Surf Pines went to the county.
But
they
who
put-
is Surf Pines?
Well, the Surf Pines Association, supposedly.
Because everyone I've talked to, they're not sure who did it. But I
I
knew
sat
it was
in
way
those Surf Pines, they did a couple different things. One, they limited the size of the houses, in other words, how high you could go.
26 and then 18
Because it used to
on
be
the-
35, okay?
Really?
Yeah, all these, the Hazeltine's house was 35, this could have been 35, it's not 35. Duger's house, that was built, that's 35. But Surf Pines limited the height restriction on the lower level to 18 feet
Right.
and 28 feet.
26.
Or 26, whatever, yeah, okay, correct.
Okay.
So that was done, they had to create a separate zone for that because those dimensions are different than the SF, or SRF1.
Which I'm in
single
over
family.
on Shady Pine.
Yeah.
I'm in that.
Part of
zone.
Surf Pines is that, part of it is CBR, just depending on the time frame.
And most of it's Mannion is kind of the separator. It seems like anything on the, well, they have the lots on Mannion, so it would have been the lots off Mannion East.
Yeah, and those were, again, Seppa's family had part of that, and they were never part of Surf Pines, but during the 1980s, during the comprehensive plan, that's when a lot of that happened, and this is the other thing that I remember going into meetings in the latter part of the 70s, when they put this building line in, this is the building line, okay? I mean, that's kind of, I don't want to go into that.
Okay.
But anyway, the Miller Malarkey family wanted their properties to be recognized as part of Surf Pines properties because they were. But nobody would stand up for them, and they didn't hire an attorney, they didn't do anything to really support their cause. And I sat there and I listened to those meetings. I wasn't involved, I didn't own any property at that time in this area. I did down in the Delray Beach area. But the Surf Pines people, when I can't remember the name of the president at the time, it wasn't Todd, it was somebody else, and I got the name written down somewhere, but.
Well, Ralph Todd didn't become president until 2000.
Okay, well then, yeah, it wasn't him, I can't remember. what the
No,
guy's
this
name
would have
was.
happened in '82, and we didn't move here until '96.
But that's why all this property was zoned RA5, and that's why we had the problem with only 24 building sites. But yeah, Barney probably did do this because the more I think about it, I mean, he was the one that put these little tiny lots in here.
Yeah, and then Mannion was stuck having to sell them, but
Yeah.
when he took it over. But the question was, who initiated the zoning? Because everyone I've talked to, they know that there was somebody, and I figured it was somebody from Surf Pines because they wanted to protect themselves from smaller lots. But no one has been able to tell me who it was that went to the county to get the county to zone it.
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, well, I'll eventually find out, but that's one of the things that
Yeah, it
I'm...
wasn't my dad. My dad, he wasn't involved in any of those things. But and it could have been, maybe the county. I don't know. Maybe it was this. Kurt Snyder, who was the planning director at the time, was famous for restricting development. I mean, it could have been Kurt's idea. Kurt could have been the one.
If you've got, I appreciate all the time you're giving me, but if you've got something going on, let me know. We can, continue at a later date. But
No, I'm just trying to think about it.
But anyway, that was one of the questions that I've been trying to identify is who was the one that initiated the CBRs to get the county to do it.
Yeah, I don't know. And this is the only area, I believe, that has a CBR zone. I don't think any other area.
No, CBR is specific to surf lines.
Surf lines.
It's nowhere else.
Correct.
And it's so unique. And the key thing, it does not have anything to do with sewage or water. It's specific to height
Yeah,
and size.
right.
And that's really all it really does. But basically what it is it kind of replaced the CCNRs that they'd lost. But it didn't have anything to do with as far as vehicles or anything like
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Anyway, if you happen to, remember and that, let me know, because that's the big question that I'm just personally curious about, because I know somebody had enough initiative to make that happen.
I might have something on that in Portland, and it would have had to do with early zoning, because by that time I'd purchased some property. I told you I wound up making a trade with the county for this property. This is part of that.
That's where you transferred your densities.
Correct. In other words, I transferred that to this. The county owned that. I traded in this for this, and I got that. And then my friend Jim Lucas decided he wanted to move to Spain, so I wound up buying property, this little section from him, along with some property in the back. It was about.
That's how he paid for his trip to
48.
Spain?
You know, more than that. But Barney had, believe it or not, I was never in favor of this, but in 1969, Barney Lucas got approval for a 560 unit condominium project and a 9-hole golf course on all this property.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. And I didn't like the idea, but anyway, he had all the approvals, and Barney got sick 3 or 4 years later and wound up dying. But Jim wound up with the property, and I wound up buying it from Jim with 2 partners, Martin Nygaard and Chuck Poindexter. And we held it all those years, and then I put the rest of the property together, and we formed the Pinehurst Development.
Okay.
That's how it happened. But
Something I learned that really surprised me, and somehow I get the feeling that Mike wasn't real fond of his dad, but when Bill died, he left Mike's mom $11,000.
that's it.
That was it. And then she went ahead and transferred the pumps, because Bill owned the roads and the pumps. He had gotten that when he took it over from Lucas.
Well, that's not exactly true, and Susan Holloway knows a little bit about this, as do the lawyers for Surf Lines. But Barney retained control of all the roads until just before he died, and we know this because the Surf Lines attorney at the time was a man named Lou Larson, who was also one of my attorneys. Lou Larson was from Astoria, or lived in Astoria. He represented Surf Lines for more than 20 years. He's since passed away, I believe. But just before Barney died, well, no, maybe a couple years or a couple years before Barney died, when they did the Strawberry Hill development, which is on the northern part of Surf Lines.
Right.
Rick Charlton, who was my partner in developing Pinehurst, was putting the project together, and Lou was doing the research on it, and he determined, as did another lawyer, that Barney retained control of the roads in Surf Lines. And Barney had Lou prepared a document, a quitclaim form, to get Barney to sign off control of the roads and give them to the Surf Lines Association. Jim and I, his son, went up to see Barney, who was in a rest home convalescence center. And basically Jim and I, we forged Barney's signature. Barney couldn't do anything at the time. But that's it, and this is in probably 81 or something, 79 or 80. And we have a copy of that document that I wound up getting to Susan Holloway. And it was important because the people that developed Polo Ridge claimed they had the right through the Waterhouse family to get into their property off Surf Lines Lane. Well, the Waterhouse family got approval to come off Surf Lines Lane from Bill Mannion, who stated he had control of the roads. Bill Mannion didn't have control of the roads.
And that's what Palmberg was using for his
Correct.
excuse to get in. That's how they eventually were able to get some money out of him.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
So when Mike Mannion says that his dad had control of the roads, he thought he may have, but Barney didn't do it. he kept the roads in his name and in Helen's name, and Helen had since died, so she was gone. Barney was the only one that was living at the time. So Jim and I went up, and I'll never forget, Jim knew how to sign his first dad, and he signed it, and we got somebody that was, that worked at the rest home convalescent center to notarize it. And we explained the situation that we had to have it notarized. And, we got Barney's hand to do it, Jim moved his hand around, and so she notarized it. So.
Okay, yeah, you see,
So,
so basically
but
it was.
Mannion did probably control the water, but he didn't control all the roads.
Now, the other thing he said is the gatehouse, that the gatehouse was Bill's original real estate office.
That's true.
And then they
We had a
moved it over-
caretaker there years ago, the guy named Ollie Matson. He was the first caretaker in Surf Pines. And they hired him, and he was an interesting fellow right out of the war. He had tattoos all over his arms and big Popeye arms, but his name was, I believe his name was Ollie Matson.
Manson?
Matson, M-A-T-S-O-N, I think that was the guy's last name. I know his first name was Ollie. And he lived there, and they had a little chain that went across the road.
Where the gate is now?
Yeah. And then they had a separate road that went off to the right, kind of into Earl's property. It wasn't really Sir Pine's property, and the locals knew where that was, and they could go around a couple of pine trees and avoid the gate.
Yeah, because they didn't put the gate in until late 80s, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay, well that's interesting about the gatehouse, because like I said, the rumor was that it was down on 101, and
No, that's not true.
Okay.
It was never true.
Super. Okay, well those were some of the big questions that I had.
And Ray Earl had, his cows used to come up here all the time. The cows would be up in this area because Ray owned all this property, and his farm was right here. So he owned all this property. And well, the other thing, the really interesting thing, and make sure this gets in, when Barney, after he sold this house to Mom and Dad, and then he sold the house on the Lower Ridge, then he built the house that Rolf Klepp had, which is now owned by the, I don't think of the family in a minute.
Actually, it just got donated about a month ago to the Maritime Museum. Ward is his
Ward
last
Cook.
name.
Ward
Cook.
Ward Cook bought that house from the
Right, and he has donated that to the
Well, that's
Maritime.
wonderful.
Yeah, Steve Dawson told me yesterday.
Rolf was like a father to me. They didn't have any children, and he'd be over at our house 3 times a week, and he gave me all his shotguns, used to take me duck hunting, and I still have a bunch of the stuff that he's given me.
Now there used to be, I remember Al Sellers.
But I need to
Oh, go ahead.
make
Let's
a
finish
point.
your story. Yeah.
Once Barney built the house that was Rolf Klepp's house, Barney got into, he got daffodils from the church up on the Presbyterian church.
The Pioneer Church.
Yeah, the Pioneer Church. He got daffodils, and he started planting daffodils around Sir Pines. And he bought 2 incubators, and he raised pheasants and quail.
That's where the pheasants in Surf Pines came from.
Absolutely, and quail. We had California quail, little things like that. And until Surf Pines really started developing, and there were a lot of cats around here, we had pheasants and quail everywhere. And so that's what I always wanted to do with the Reed Ranch. I bought an incubator. I still have it. It's in Randy Cruz's garage. But I was going to raise pheasants and quail. I always thought that was such a neat thing to have these pheasants and quail.
And there's still a lot of pheasants around, because I know when we lived here before, we had a husky chow, and she used to love. She didn't do it. She just liked to chase them.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And she, you wouldn't think a husky chow would be a good bird dog. She was the best.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was. And I always wondered, because pheasants, this is not really conducive weather for pheasants.
Right. Well, Rolf Klepp was a wonderful man, and we went through all the hardships of Rolf trying to raise money. I mean, he'd spend a couple days a week in Portland trying to raise money. Sometimes he'd come back.
For the Maritime Museum.
Maritime Museum. Sometimes he'd come back so depressed, he'd just be.
Because he had this huge collection, and he tried to donate it to the Historical District or Society, and they just kind of foo-fooed him. It's what
he was
Steve
just a
said.
brilliant guy. He was just, he was really neat.
Anyway, Ward Cook, Steve Dawson told me yesterday that
Good for
he
him.
donated. Now, I think that he'll probably, it won't actually transfer until he actually dies.
Yeah.
But basically, the Maritime Museum, he donated the whole house and property.
Yeah, that's great.
And that happened, like I said, about 3-4 weeks ago.
I think that's wonderful.
So that's some good news. Well, I'm going to be working with Jeff Smith over there because I was doing a bunch of research for, remember Jeff Daly?
Sure. He's a character.
Got a lot of ideas. Anyway, he was going to do his underground tour.
Okay.
And so I did all the scripts, so that's how I got to meet Lisa and Mac and all the guys over there. And that's when they had that big fire over in Aberdeen. That they lost all their historical records. And I says, you guys need to do something. They says, well, we've talked about digitizing, but it's too expensive. So Annie and I happen to have we know of a family trust, so we went ahead and put a request in for a grant. We got $25,000 out of them last year. And so we're buying this professional scanning system, and it's through archive.org, which is like the third largest digital library in the world. And so they've got this, they call it the Scribe It. And so we're going to start digitizing. We'll start with Cumtux and city directories. Well, because of that, Jimmy over there at the Astoria Library, basically he has half of the Historical Society stuff in his basement.
Yeah.
And so he's going to be part of it. He's got some monies for a digital archivist. And I can get a renewal on this funding again this year. So what we're hoping to do is get a group of us together. Jeff Smith just got a ton of money for digitizing a lot of their stuff. And he has no clue what he
Well,
wants
after
to
you get
do.
going, you call me, let me know. I'll give you $1,000 for my company up in Astoria. My mom was, she was a talent. Her family had Talent Grant Packing Company in Astoria. They were the second
really?
largest packers in the
Mm-hmm.
world.
No, I'm very familiar with
They're
it.
huge. And, she grew up in this beautiful house on 17th and Irving, which is 10,000 square foot house. It was built by the first senator in the state.
I know
Fulton.
exactly where the house is.
Fulton, John Wolcott,
Mhm.
and most of the furniture they have, my mom gave them. It came from this house because it was her furniture that she had when she was a little girl growing up.
Oh, be darned.
But anyway, the Wolcotts are real close. And then on the other cousin that we have was Evan Carruthers, who started E.H. Carruthers Company. My dad was a minority partner. He owned 9% of E.H. Carruthers Company, and that was they're all over the Maritime Museum.
Now, was your dad a developer also?
No, my dad. My dad's parents owned 2 hotels in Girard, the Golf Hotel, which burned down, and then they built the Ocean House, which was a pretty famous hotel.
Right, I remember the Ocean
They tore
House.
that down in 69 or 70. But my dad, after the war, his cousin, Evan Carruthers, came back from the East Coast. He went to MIT or Cornell, I think he went to Cornell. He taught back there, and he had an idea that he could revolutionize the tuna industry. Tuna was just coming online in the latter part of the 40s. So he talked my dad into getting involved with him, and my dad bought a minor share, 9%, I believe, in E.H. Carruthers Company, and they started working on this prototype machine in the garage that we had in Girard. That's when we lived in Girard before we bought this house. And it took him a couple of years, and my dad was real close with the CRPA people, Columbia River Packers Association, Ed Thompson and Jim Sellers, and all those guys, Sandos. They played golf
Jim
together.
Sellers, that was Alan's
Alan's-
grandfather?
Yes.
Okay.
No, his father.
Oh, that was his father?
Yeah,
Oh,
Jim
okay.
Sellers. So anyway, my dad got involved with them and told them about this machine, so they got involved with us. And over the course of a couple of years, in 1949, I believe, it was 49, CRPA said, we'll buy 2 of your machines. And the machines were going to cost $58,000 a piece, really expensive machines. But what the machines would do would take the tuna off the conveyor belt, put the proper amount of tuna into the can, put oil in the can, seal the can, and put it over here for cooking. Now that's all, they talk about this at the Columbia River Maritime Museum, and then there's a separate little tiny museum up on Pier 39.
Oh,
up the
where
cold storage.
Rogue River is.
Yeah.
I've been through that museum.
There's a whole big section on E.H. Carruthers Company. Evan
Yeah,
Carruthers.
okay, that's where I recognize the name
Yeah,
then.
that
Okay.
was my dad's part. My cousin, that was related to my mom. My mom was a talent, okay? And the talents were related to the Carruthers.
Oh,
So
yeah.
my dad, after they got the orders from CRPA, my dad went to the SBA and borrowed $200,000, which was a lot of money in those days.
Oh, yeah.
And they
It's like
built-
2 million, almost 3 million
They
now.
built a plant in Warrenton. And the first thing my dad did was, probably the smartest thing he's ever done, is he talked Evan Carruthers out of selling the machines, because they were convinced they had a monopoly on the market. No one else had this in the world. into charging a royalty or a put through. So every can of tuna that was produced, they got like an eighth of a cent or something, okay?
Yeah.
Well, CRPA, their production went from, like in 1950, these machines came online, and as soon as they signed that contract, that was when my dad bought this house. Okay, right after my dad got the loan from the SBA, and
Oh, so he already knew he had money in his
Oh,
pocket when he got Barney drunk, huh?
He knew that they were in good shape. Okay, so within a short period of time, CRPA went from producing like 50,000 cases of tuna a year. The first year they were in, they produced 150,000 cases. 2 or 3 years later, 500,000, then 1 million cases a year. And by then, by 53 and 54, every tuna company or manufacturing company in the world, StarKist, Chicken of the Sea, Van Camp, you name it, they all were leasing machines from E.H. Carruthers Company out of Hammond, Oregon. And Dad was flying all over the world doing this shit.
Oh, be darned.
And they controlled the world market. And then they got old, they didn't spend enough money on research and development. Evan had other interests. He built sailing boats, he built a pea picking machine that was really interesting. And in 1957, they put this pea picking machine on a great big two flatbeds, and they drove it to Walla Walla, the pea fields, and FMC came up. And at the time, FMC was trying to buy E.H. Carruthers Company, and FMC bought the patents to that machine for $1 million. And it would take the machine would go out in the pea fields. I remember watching it. I was 12 years old. My dad drove up to Walla Walla in this brand new Chevrolet pickup that the company bought, and my dad was smoking cigars all the way up there. We get the pea field, and the machine goes out, and it takes the pods off the vines, takes the peas out of the pods, put the pods over here and the peas over there. Kind of the similar technology that he had in the.
He must have been a hell of an engineer.
Oh, he was brilliant. He was just off the charts brilliant. You know, he really was. He was just an unbelievable guy. I thought so much of him, and I mean, it was a special time. I mean, there was a lot of activity going on down there.
Oh yeah.
You know, in
Well,
Bumblebee.
that's how Bumblebee got involved, because McGowan was president,
They
and Allen
changed
was
once they started with these pack forming machines from E.H. Carruthers Company. They hired a large firm in Portland, in New York, and the firm recommended that they change the name from CRPA to Bumblebee. They changed the name in 51 or 52.
Oh, I didn't know CRP. So that was the.
It was the founding of Bumblebee was originally CRPA, Columbia River Packers Association, which was a
I didn't
consortium.
ever tie the two together.
You know, different groups. That was how it is. And Ed Thompson was the president. He was my dad's good friend. Well, actually, his father started it, and they called him Thule Thompson. They nicknamed him after a Thule salmon. But then his son was Ed Thompson, who was the one that was real close to my dad.
Mm-hmm.
But they were great people. I mean, and Jim Sellers was like the accountant or one of the executives, and Tom Sandoz was involved, and Gustavich Brothers, and they're just, I mean, it's a great group.
Let me make sure I got this recording. I think it's still going, but oh yeah, we're doing good. Okay, I just want to make
So
sure.
that's my history. So that's a little bit about my history and my story. So I'm happy to do that with your project, just because of the connections with my family.
Thank
and
you.
story.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll be able. We're supposed to have the equipment. In fact, I called her yesterday to see when we're getting delivery. But you know, my thinking is that we've got to digitize this stuff and make it available online so anyone can have access to
Right.
it. And this machine's phenomenal. They took. You know, I'm bragging a little bit, but it's really cool. They took this machine and they took it to Great Britain, and they decided they wanted to get all of the medical publications that Great Britain has ever done on medicine. So they took a group, they had 18 of these machines, both the smaller ones and the bigger ones, and they scanned everything from the 1400s all the way to current date. And what they ended up doing is they used these scanners, and a lot of the stuff in the 1500s was in Latin and, you know, this type of thing. So they had a bunch of archivists and conservators that would analyze it and do all the metadata information on it.
Yeah.
So, you know, basically one of the big projects they have the entire medical history of the United Kingdom all digitized and online.
Mm.
And then like Georgetown, their entire legal library now is all digitized.
Cool.
And so that's what we're hoping to do. We'll start with the Historical Society, but what we're hoping to do is to tie in they've got a really neat the lady who's head of the Seaside Library, one of the sharpest ladies ever, she
Mhm.
got a $30,000 grant for Warrenton.
Hmm.
And that's where they're doing their thing.
Mhm.
But I think what I'd like to do, and I've been talking to the Oregon Heritage Commission, and they've got some funding that we're going to go after, but they're trying to set standards for digitization. So what I'm hoping is that we'll make Astoria kind of the Northwest Center for digitization of historical documents.
Cool.
That's what I do in my spare time.
Okay. Well,
Anyway, we got.
I'm on board. So
Thank you.
sounds good. Well, I don't know what else I can tell you.
Well, you have given me a mountain of information to start with. And, I know what I wanted to ask you. I have a picture, and fortunately I got it on my camera. The board of directors in 2000. I've got pictures there, and I think Rick Charlton was on the board in 2000, 2001 when I was on the board.
Rick Charlton?
I think that was Rick.
I don't think he was. Well, he was a property owner because he owned the balance of that property, the Strawberry Hill property, with George Malarkey. But I don't think Rick was involved with me at Pinehurst at the time, and I know that he wasn't on the board of Surf Pines.